Hi, it's Liz from Cook Your Feed, and today I'm making some delicious mince pies. So in my cookbook there's a recipe for some raw mince pies. I'm not making these today, but I am going to use the filling recipe. So I'm going to make a traditional baked mince pie with short crust pastry, and instead of using a jar of mincemeat, which I really enjoy, but actually I find a little bit too sweet. I prefer my raw recipe. So I've made one here which I've just finished making, so it's still quite wet looking. So it's basically 350 grams, I've doubled this recipe, so it's 700 grams of chopped dried fruit. So you can use any dried fruit you like. I think dried figs are essential, and then you can do things like raisins or sultanas, some dried cranberries, any kind of dried fruit mix that you like, with the zest and juice of 3 oranges. So for this recipe, because I've doubled it, I've used the zest and juice of 6 oranges. If you have really massive oranges like these, then just halve the recipe, for the orange bit of the recipe, and see if you need to add more. Just be a bit sensible. So you don't want it to be too wet. The dried fruit will soak up quite a lot of this orange juice that's in here, but obviously if you put loads in, then it'll be quite a sloppy mixture. Oh, and there's also some spices in here. So well, you'll see the recipe in my book, and I'll write it on the blog as well. It's just got, per 350 grams, a teaspoon of ground ginger, a teaspoon of nutmeg, and 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. And you can add some cloves as well if you want, just those kind of warm Christmassy spices. Okay, so I'm going to let that soak. You can make this the day before so it can soak overnight, or give it at least an hour or 2 to really soak up all that delicious orange juice. Okay, and then moving on to the short crust pastry, I've measured out 200 grams of butter. Obviously I use a plant-based one, 300 grams of plain flour, and just a couple of tablespoons of caster sugar. So I'm going to get in there now with the tips of my fingers. So you don't want to use the palms so much, then it'll warm up the pastry too much. You want to try and keep it nice and cool, and then just kind of work it into each other. So just rub the flour into the butter until you get a wet sand texture. It's just a really useful recipe to know off the top of your head as well. I use it for my pumpkin pie recipe, or anything that needs a sweet short crust. And if you want to make a savoury short crust pastry, it's exactly the same recipe, just leave out the sugar and add a pinch of salt. Simple. So the savoury one's good for making quiches and tarts, that sort of savoury stuff. Okay, so it's getting to that wet sand texture now. Let me just show you. So it should look kind of crumbly like this, like wet beach sand. And then just make sure there's no big lumps of butter anywhere. No, I think that's good. And then I'm just going to add just a tiny splash at a time of cold water, so up to 2 tablespoons. You might not need the full 2 tablespoons. It kind of depends what brand of butter you use, how much water content that has. Okay, so you want to get it so it can just kind of squish together into a neat ball. I just need a teeny touch more. So that probably was just under 2 tablespoons there. Okay, so it's easier if you then tip it out onto a clean work surface. And then you don't want to knead it or anything like that, you just want to bring it together into a neat ball. And then you need to let it chill for about half an hour at least. It's much easier if you do this in a food processor with the blade attachment. So just put the butter, flour and sugar in first, let it process till it comes to that wet sand texture, and then keep it running, and then just drizzle in the tablespoon or two of cold water, and it will just magically form into a ball. You can just pop it out, pop it in the fridge. Okay, this is looking good. So I'm gonna pop that into the bowl and then get a damp tea towel and cover it up and pop it in the fridge to rest for half an hour. Okay, the pastry's had plenty of time to rest in the fridge now, so I'm just going to roll it out. So first we need to dust the clean work surface with some flour, and then I just added a tiny bit of extra pastry in there from my pumpkin pie, which I'm filming at the same time. You can have a look at that in a separate video. Just dust the top a bit as well, and a rolling pin. And actually I'm going to take off about a third for now for the top, so 2/3 for the base of the mince pies, and you want about a third for the top. So just roll it out. I like my mince pie pastry to be fairly thick. The pastry is like partly the best bit, isn't it? So I'm going to roll it out to about 4 millimeters thick, that kind of thickness. Okay, and then you want to find, so you need a muffin tin, and you want to find something circular to cut out your pastry bases. So this takeaway coffee cup's about the right size, so it's a bit bigger than the circle. Right, so I'm going to cut out 12 of those. 1, 2, and then just squish it together, roll it out again, keep going until you've got 12 bases. A little bit from that bit I saved for the top. Let's see. No, it's going to be the perfect amount. Okay, 12. Alright, then just gently work them into each little hole, each little muffiny bit. And you want to gently push into the corners as well. Okay, I like them kind of rustic looking, so I'm not going to be too fussy about them. The mixture that has been soaking in the orange juice is all perfect now. So I'm just going to put a tablespoon into each mince pie. And this is going to make loads, so I can pop this in the fridge and just use it up within the week. And then we'll make the top. So again, just flour the work surface. That anymore, and then roll it out into about 4 millimeters thick. And then I use a little star cookie cutter and just put a little star on each one. but you could do little rounds as well, so just find a slightly smaller round cookie cutter and completely cover it if you want to. I like to do these little stars so that they just look so beautiful, and you can see that lovely mincemeat poking through. And I've even got enough pastry left to make another couple when these come out the oven. I'm just gonna roll this out and make as many as I can extra. So they look so good, don't they? So just for a little crunchy topping, I'm just gonna sprinkle just a tiny bit of caster sugar on the top of each one. And as it bakes in the oven, it's just gonna be so good. You can leave this bit out and dust them with icing sugar at the end instead, however you prefer. Okay, and then I'm going to pop these in the oven until they're golden brown, so probably only about 15 minutes or so. Just keep an eye on them, and then yeah, when they're done, just let them cool in the tray before you pop them out. Just let them cool slightly because they'll still be quite wobbly, and then pop them out when they're firm enough to handle onto a cooling rack and let them cool completely before you store them in a sealed container, and they should last for about a week.